Okay, everyone. Yeah. So I will be straightforward. The following story will be quite serious, without any jokes from my side, but this is a needed story. So usually people know at least like bullet points of Second World War, at least roughly what was going on, and they know that in Eastern Europe the front line changed 2 times. So then there is this obvious question: what's the damage to the city? Because you know there are plenty of cities as Danzig, Warsaw, Minsk, which were wiped from the map. In our case, we were quite lucky. We lost at its max 4% of the buildings. And the damage mostly was in Old Town, because the river Daugava for a couple of hours, half a day, it was a front line, so shells exchanged. The suburbs, they are as they were standing before. But we lost something else. We lost something what I would call the structure of society. Meaning before the Second World War, in Riga was quite a big Baltic German community, living here from the founding of the city in 1201. And from early 1600s there was quite a big Jewish society as well. When the Second World War was about to start, 1938, Baltic Germans emigrated back to Germany to escape this coming war, this brewing tension. Because everyone could sense that Nazi Germany and the USSR, at some moment they will clash. And then during the Nazi occupation, so 1941 till 44/45, depending which territory you are looking, in Holocaust perished our entire Jewish community. Of course, you know, it's such a large-scale tragedy that it's really hard to give you some fixed numbers. They always go with a plus-minus mark. In Riga, we lost around 70,000 people, plus additional 20,000 were brought in from the neighboring territories for the execution, like Ukraine or Belarus. In Riga, it wasn't some giant death camp like Auschwitz in Poland. Here it was happening a little bit different. This street what we just crossed, if you would be going straight there, 2 blocks, there the Riga's ghetto started. But the Nazis, they didn't build some new buildings like barracks. They put the Jewish people inside already existing buildings. So if you would go there without this story, without additional information, you wouldn't be able to tell that dark and terrible things used to happen there. And if you would take the same street, walking straight around 10 kilometers, the city is ending. And on the outskirts there are 2 massive forests, Rumbulas and Bitternie. In both of them are memorial sites. Because in a couple of campaigns, people from the ghetto were led to the forests and 1 bullet in the back of your head. Right now the Jewish society, not only in Riga, but in the entire country, in Latvia, is really small. It's around 9,000 people. And even there is a gap. They mostly are not descendants of the original society, but they moved here from different Soviet republics during the Soviet era. So I can say that our original Jewish society have been lost like 95%. But if we are talking about some visual reminders, architecture, there still is a lot of lovely buildings built by brilliant Jewish architects. About synagogues, it's a different story. Because when the Nazis took Riga in 1941, July 1st, after 3 days, July 4, they torched everything down. And that's why July 4, every year, it's a commemorational day for the Holocaust in Latvia. 1 synagogue survived, it's called Beit of Shul, that you can see in Old Town. Everything else was reduced to ruin. For example, here, this is artificial memorial place. These are not the actual ruins. This was erected here in 1993, but they used some elements of the destroyed synagogue, like there you can see there's a little ornament, there's 2 flowers. And the only problem is with this memorial place, the scale. Too small. Here was standing one of the biggest synagogues in Baltics, taking entire square. So there's this one, how to say, sort of a controversial question, usually coming from tourists, but not in moments like these when there's everyone, but when we are going from point A to point B, when you can approach me up front, then usually people are giving a little bit more sensitive topics, so away from everyone else. And I think I could explain this for everyone, because this is always coming up. And the question usually sounds like, Latvia during the Second World War was siding with the Nazis, with the USSR, or sticking in the middle. To be honest, we didn't have the option to choose. Because the story is quite similar for all 3 Baltic countries, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. They were independent countries between both world wars, 1918 till 1940. And so the Second World War for us is starting not with the Nazi occupation in 41, but with the Soviet occupation in 1940. The first thing what the Soviets did, they deported to Siberia around 16,000 people. Those who were in charge before, ministers, politicians, military, intelligence in general. And that's why you can see those really bizarre scenes in museums as photographs. When the Wehrmacht is moving in Riga, in this 41 July 1st, there are people in the streets with flowers and flags, and German army is welcomed like liberators. Because people saw the Red Terror, and they were expecting the Germans will liberate and restore independence. But the reality hit hard really fast. In the second day of Nazi occupation, Nazi regime released a statement that no, it's not in our intentions to restore independence in Baltics. All three Baltic countries, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, will be fused together in an administrational unit called Ostland, and that will be part of the Greater Germany. And then your friends start to disappear, your neighbors start to disappear, so the Holocaust starts, repressions, and so on, and people mostly understood that Nazis are not so much better than the Soviets. And this is describing our history in a little bit wider perspective. Because, you know the saying, the bigger the nationality numbers, the bigger the oversimplification is used, especially when you talk about history. First example, movies about Second World War coming from USA and Russia's Federation. It's a paradox, but they are the same. Usually there you can see the forces of light versus the forces of darkness. Epic clash. Well, there's the gray area in the middle. And usually this is better in those countries which literally were in the middle. So that's why we are trying to escape oversimplifications. For example, how we are covering Holocaust in our educational system. We are talking with the kids in high schools, and we are talking about both. Those Latvians who guarded the ghetto, and those Latvians who pulled the trigger in the middle of those forests. But in the same time, we are talking about Latvians who showed remarkable bravery. There is a monument in the distance with long list of names. That's meant for all of those Rigans who tried to save Jewish community during the Holocaust. But to be honest with you, those are the far sides of the spectrum. 98% of the society were just trying to keep their head under the radar, to escape both Soviet and Nazi repressions. And that's why we are trying to escape those big words as good guys, bad guys. Nazis, communists, Germans, Russians. It's not how history works. We usually are trying to check every individual case. And just to sum this up and to give one more illustration. This is not a story from my family, but a little bit borrowed from one of my best friends. He had quite, I would say, awkward family meetings. Because his grandfather during the war was conscripted by the Nazis to fight in their behalf. His wife's grandfather was serving in the Red Army. And it wasn't like they were choosing, oh, I will join this or that. It was a mobilization. So you are joining the troops, or there's a nice labor camp for you. And in one Christmas dinner, both granddads were chatting about previous days, and they could basically pinpoint a couple of moments through the war when they were literally at the same time at the same location. So we can logically assume that they were shooting in each other's general direction. And this is not like anecdotal case. This is absolutely normal part of our complicated family stories. That's why we are trying to escape those big words, big boxes, because it's usually not so easy to apply that to the reality. So, maybe some questions while we are on this more serious, maybe sensitive, controversial topic. It's always better to ask a local. If it's written in the internet, it's not always true.
How was it after World War II? So when the Russians faced the liberation of Riga, or is it seen
Soviet.
as a Soviet? Is it seen as a liberation from the Nazis, or?
Yeah. You know that in Latvia there is quite a big Russian-speaking minority, right? Yeah. In Riga, Russian speaking minority is forming like 31%. In Riga, it's 37.1. The thing is, there is, I wouldn't call it a stereotype or misconception. It's simply a disinformation. I will call it bluntly as it is. All around the internet, there is floating this big idea that there is a big wave of Russophobia in Latvia and that the society is on the brink of some national conflict, like locals and the Russian speakers. Well, not quite the case. If there is 1/3 of the people who are Russian speakers, same office, same public areas, plenty of mixed couples as well. Usually we are living side by side. Maybe sometimes we are not the best buds, but we are not fighting each other as well. There are countless tourists from Russia, and they are living in one piece. It's not like we are beating them on every corner. So there is a lot of tension, but that's the next level. Geopolitics, meaning Latvia is part of NATO and EU and Russia's Federation as well. Russia's Federation, because of Georgia 2008, because of Ukraine right now, Crimea, Donbas, all of that, the relationships between the countries are ice cold. And it's a really soft way to put that. There is a big iceberg in the middle. But we don't allow this level to spoil this level. So usually the daily communications are chill. Of course, there are jerks. There are terrible Latvians and terrible Russians, and you know that the crazy ones are the loudest. So they can make the impression that there is something going on, while in reality it's okay. But they are the hot potatoes. You know, the sensitive topics. And what you mentioned, that's one of that. About the end of Second World War. May 8, May 9. May 8, it's a memorial day all over the globe. When you remember the end of the Second World War, you put down flowers, you remember your fallen soldiers, relatives, sacrifices, tragedies, beauty, and then the good and the bad, basically. And it's more like a memorial day. While May 9 in Soviet Union was called the Victory Day. And that's like parade, fireworks, concerts, pop stars, barbecue. And it's still celebrated by some part of Latvia's Russian-speaking minority, and it's extremely popular in Russia and Belarus. In Riga, it's done by some part of our Russian-speaking minority, not all of them, some part. And Latvians are walking around with this, what we are calling palāka seja. So the grey face, little bit grumpy. Because we are saying that it's not our celebration. The official history of the USSR stated that the Red Army liberated all 3 Baltic countries from the Nazi threat. And I can agree. That far, I can agree. But then they sort of forgot to leave for 50 years. So sorry, by any definition of liberation, it's not a liberation if you overstay 50 years and you are starting to do propaganda, repressions, and there was the second wave of deportations as well. 1949, when they were trying to get rid of kulaks, the so-called bourgeoisie, the wealthy people. But they had quite a loose definition who is bourgeoisie. It didn't mean that you own a manor, too many cows. That was a valid argument to have a one-way ticket to Siberia. And keeping in mind how small nationality are Latvians, it's quite a challenge to find a Latvian family which haven't been suffering from Soviet repressions one level or another. That's why in the midst of Latvians, the same about Lithuanians, Estonians, Soviet Union is not maybe a bubble of nostalgia. About Russian-speaking minorities, sometimes yes. And I can sort of understand, because back then Russian was the dominant language, dominant culture, and some of them were really just patriots of the USSR. And then their country poofed away, and now they are stuck in Estonia or Latvia. So, as many things what I have mentioned today, which are a little bit more controversial or problematic, as, I don't know, about economy, society, history, the solution, in my opinion, is quite simple. Time. You know, Soviet Union collapsed 27 years ago. It's literally nothing. We are not able to release the toxins, because we cannot talk about those events without emotions. Someone will be saying, but there was the Soviet Union, we were building everything, that was such a great idea. Someone against is like, yeah, but they deported my grandma. And you know, when you are going too much in emotions, the logic is out of the window. So I think we must change the generation, or maybe 2 of those, and then maybe we will be ready. Some more questions? Well,
how's it with citizenship for the Russian minority?
You're referring to non-citizens, I'm guessing, right? You're referring to the non-citizens.
Yeah. Yeah.
The thing is, Latvia and Estonia, those are the only 2 countries, as far as I know, where is a part of society called non-citizens. The story is a really complicated story, but I will try to break it apart in bullet points. If at some moment you are losing me, just scream, because this is a really complicated topic. So basically, when the USSR fell apart in 1991, there was a long list of issues. What to do with the borders, with the Soviet military object, currency, and what to do with the citizenship. Latvia and Estonia did the same thing. If you could prove that you or your family members were citizens before the occupation in 1940, like if you could track down that your, I don't know, father's brothers, sisters, something was a citizen in 1936, you could have citizenship right now, plus your extended family. What to do with all of those people coming in during the Russification, 50s, 60s, and so on? For them was made a test. 2 bits. The easy one, it's like law system and bullet points of history. Things that you can study like in 1 week. The tricky bit is the language. So in Latvia and Estonia, to have a citizenship, it's mandatory to know the local languages. And here the situation got tricky, because some part of the Russian-speaking minority was not able to form a sentence in Latvian, in Estonia in Estonian, so they couldn't pass the test. So for them was made a special status called non-citizen. What's the difference? They have 3 restrictions. Obviously they cannot vote, because for that you need citizenship. Number 2, they cannot work in military. Number 3, they cannot work in governmental institutions, as city hall, ministry or something. And just to clarify, it's not like they missed the mark in 90s. They can do the test tomorrow. No, it's Sunday. After 2 days. After 1 week. After 2 years. So, I'm not buying the argument that in 27 years from collapse of the USSR, you're not able to study a language. And you could be saying, hey, but 1/3 of Latvia already speaks Russian as the first language. Where's the problem? Let's make Russian the second official language. Почти каждый латыш знает русский язык. Но русскоязычный как-то не учиться наше, это просто обидно. Meaning, we usually know Russian, but they don't know Latvian, and then it's a little bit not fair. And also, we understand that Latvian is a unique language. It's spoken only in this country, and we have seen the worst case scenario. Neighboring country called Belarus. In Belarus is Belarusian language. It's not the same as Russian. It's like German Dutch, basically. Right now, I was recently in Minsk, I was in Belarus traveling 3 weeks. As they told me, and as what I saw on the daily scenery, that Belarusian and daily communication in Belarus is done by 10% of people. And it's like a hipster thing between the youngsters to know your own language. And you can see how terribly wrong is this statement, when your own language is a hipster thing to do. That's why we simply have those harsh language policies. But again, those non-citizens, they are the older generation. Younger kids, they know Latvian better or maybe not so good, but they know it. So they already are the citizens. So going in the really dark side of the humor, the problem is literally dying out. Okay, let's run.